Start the recording. Welcome, everybody, to WebChat with Minnesota Adult Education. Today is Wednesday, July 16th, 2025, and it's great to see all of you virtually today. On our agenda today, we have only a couple topics, but a lot to talk about. And so we'll be talking about, we have some announcements and updates to share. We'll be talking about professional development. We'll be walking through the August reporting submission. In addition, we're going to talk about adult education funding, and we will have time for questions at the end. Although I will note that we'll have questions, we'll have the opportunity for questions throughout the webinar as well. And we encourage you to ask questions in the chat as we go along, and we'll try to address them as we are able. So that is our agenda for today. On our adult education team here at the Minnesota Department of Education, we have currently a team of 6. My name is Brad Haskamp. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm the State Director of Adult Education. I'm going to hand it off to Julie.
Julie, you're muted.
Sorry, I'm the transition specialist. My name's Julie Dinko and my pronouns are she, her, and I'll hand it off to Neil.
Hello, folks. My name is Neil Allard. My pronouns are they, them. I'm the Records, Communications, and Admin Support Specialist. I'm going to hand it to Jody to introduce.
Jody, we can't hear you. No.
Okay, I'm gonna keep talking.
Now we can hear you.
Okay, all right. Brad and I are sharing a space, so we're navigating some audio trickery here. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I am Jody Versa. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the program quality specialist on the team. And now I'm gonna hand it to Astrid.
Thanks, Jody. Hi, everyone. I'm Astrid Leiden. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the professional development specialist on the team. Good to be here with you all today. And I'll pass it to Haley.
Hey everybody, good afternoon. My name is Haley Swanson. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Grants, Records, and Admin Support Specialist here at the team. And I will kick it over to Brad to, I believe, work on announcements and updates.
That is correct, Haley. Thanks, everyone. Wonderful team. I love working with the coworkers that we have here at the Department of Education. We do have several announcements and updates today, so let's get started. First off, we want to send a big congratulations and thank you to Brandy. Brandy Logan has left MDE, is now working with the Southwest Metro District, ISD 288. So some of you may have questions about what about some of the work and the work that you contacted Brandy about. If you have questions about high school equivalency, GED, or HiSET issues, please contact mde.abe at state.mn.us. If you have questions about standard adult high school diploma, please contact Jody. If you have any other questions or issues that you might have normally addressed to Brandy, you can direct them to me, Brad Haskamp. One other piece of exciting news is a big congratulations to Spark. CASAS this summer, back in June, issued a National Promising Practice Award to the Minnesota Department of Education, which recognizes Spark, which stands for the Support Professional Advisory Resource Committee, recognizes Spark and that advisory committee as a best practice nationally, with specialized professional development for support professionals and just that advisory role in helping to advise the Minnesota Department of Education adult education team. Rachel Stiglitz, who is the current Spark chair and also works with Ramsey County Community Corrections, and I were able to go to the CASA Summer Institute in California in June and accept the award. And you can see the award there. So congratulations again to Spark for your outstanding work. Well, not in not positive news, we do have some things to talk about or updates regarding the 2025 federal adult education funding. So the basic message is that the federal government has not yet released the 2025 federal adult education grant funding to states and territories. These funds are typically released on July 1 to states. The U.S. Department of Education stated that they are that the funds are under review. Which thus though means there's uncertainty. We do not know when or if the funds will be released to states. So there's a little bit of a timeline just to help you understand this situation. So back in March, the U.S. legislature, Congress, and the Senate passed the continuing resolution bill, which allocated $517 million for federal adult education funding in 2025, including IELCE, Integrated English Literacy, and Civics Education grants for that funding nationally. On May 29th, the U.S. Department of Education released an estimated award for each state with federal adult education funding. That memo, though, did not have any allocations determined for integrated English literacy and civics education funding. Then we fast forward to June 30th. All states received an email from the U.S. Department of Education saying that the federal government or the federal education funds are being reviewed by the U.S. Office of Management and Budget, OMB, and that grant award notifications will not be sent to states on July 1. This funding included federal adult education funding, that is WIOA Title II funding. It also, though, included our K-12 federal adult education funding. And so that is ESSA Titles 1C funding, Titles 2A funding, Titles 3A funding, Title 4A funding, and Title 4B funding. So quite a bit of federal education funding is being withheld by the federal government during this review. As then just this week on July 14th, more than 20 states, including the state of Minnesota, filed a lawsuit for the federal government to release the federal education funding to states. And you can see in the chat, there's more information about that from the Attorney General's website. So what does per year that equal that amount of federal adult education is about 7.45 million. That's how much we had last year in 24 funding. What does that federal education adult, I can say these words in the right order. What does that federal adult education funding pay for? The majority of this goes out in flow-through funding, aka consortium grants, primarily through contact hour aid, which is for many grantees about 10% of their grant funding. Also, there's regional transitions aid, and that includes money for the online statewide training courses. Also, part of that flow through includes technology aid, which is often used to pay for an ABE consortium's license for SID and for the statewide distance learning platforms. And this also includes low incidence disability aid, which is aid to those programs that are working with learners with low incidence disabilities, such as adults who are deaf, adults who have vision impairment issues or who are blind, and also adults with traumatic brain injuries or aphasia programming. So this is the funding to grantees that is currently frozen. Also, though, as part of that federal adult education funding, there is some portion of that is for administration and leadership at the state level, up to 17.5% of the funding. And that money pays for 5.3 of the MDE staff on the adult education team. So 5.3 out of our 7 team members. It also pays for $214,000 annually for supplemental service grants, going to Literacy Minnesota to help with the statewide database, and to Atlas to help with the professional development and technical assistance work. So that is what federal adult education funding pays for. And I want to say that this is a really challenging situation. And I've heard many of you have reached out to us at the Department of Education and talking about the stress and the uncertainty and how that is affecting you and your program. Thank you for contacting us. Thank you for reaching out to talk and make sure that we're understanding the impact. We understand that this is really stressful for many of you, and that with this federal funding being withheld for an undetermined amount of time, each of you as consortia will need to make some difficult decisions on what activities you want to continue, and what activities then you maybe need to pay for temporarily out of or currently out of using other sources of funding, like state funding or some other type of funding. And you may need to make some decisions about what activities you need to pause or discontinue. So we see that stress, and we acknowledge that that's not an easy decision on your end. And that we encourage you to reach out to us as you have additional questions, as you have additional, like, if you want to share about the impact, please let us know. We are documenting that and sharing that appropriately as well, so that people understand the impact of the withholding of this 2025 federal education funding. I will say this is the last slide about our federal education funding, but I will also say there are more details and there's more information if you're curious about what can I do or what more should I know. COABE and Literacy Action Network are sharing more information on their websites and via social media, so you can look there. But we also are putting the websites in the chat as well, so you can learn more. Maybe now we can take a pause for questions. Haley, do you want to help me with questions?
Yep, absolutely. There's a couple of comments and commiserations. It looks like Susan is wondering, what does that mean for the state adult education team?
Good question. And we anticipated that question. So with that administration and leadership funding, a silver lining is that we've been underspending that funding. And so we do still have some 24, we are still working with our 24 money at this time to fund our MDE staff. So that we're using old money to utilize that as well, because we at the department here have up to 27 months to utilize that funding.
Thanks, Brad.
Good question.
Looks like Matthew Miller has inquired, has the federal government proposed new reporting on the change in public benefits, PRWOR?
There has been a new interpretation sent by the federal government. We are still reviewing that with legal counsel to determine to determine how to implement any new guidance. So good question, Matt, and we'll let you know as we have more information.
Chelsea Ritland would like to know, are the state-supported distance learning licenses such as Moby Max on hold?
Those contracts were signed prior to July 1, so those are not on hold. Those statewide distance learning licenses and the statewide SID license are still going forward, and those are active.
From Karen Walters, how will this affect our supplemental service providers? Will we have Summer Institute and other PD?
Good question. So Summer Institute is still happening, and I hope to see you there. We'll be going. We actually just got approved this week to go. So yes, Summer Institute is still happening. This does though mean that that some of the money going to supplemental services federally will be decreasing quite likely, at least in the short term until we learn more. So we will be asking for at least temporary adjustments to our supplemental service grant budgets and work plans. And so we'll be working with our supplemental service grant providers to talk through that more, but more urgently that, like, we've been already talking with Atlas, who is more immediately affected with that.
And Brad, can I just add that
Absolutely.
thankfully the majority of supplemental service funding is state funding. So given that, we don't anticipate huge disruptions to that system.
Thank you for that clarification, Astrid. Absolutely.
Eric Lind is looking ahead and wondering, is there anything in the new budget about future years for federal adult education funding?
So right now we've been talking about federal 25 money. The federal 26 budget is still in the works. I had misunderstood something earlier, but the federal 26 money and future funding is still not currently, has not yet been passed by Congress or the Senate. And so that will be taken up over the course of the summer and into this fall. So that is TBD. The initial budget proposed by President Trump has zeroed out or eliminated federal adult education funding. But that doesn't mean that that's exactly what's going to go forward. The Senate and the House had the ability to actually pass bills that define how much would be allocated to adult education. So it's a work in progress.
Mary Kate Lewis is wondering, what about e-testing seats and tickets from the state?
So e-testing seats have been paid for with state funding. So that those will continue because the state funding is still going forward, and a lot of the e-testing seats have been purchased with last year's funding or prior year's funding. So that is still going forward.
Okay, and it looks like at this point there's one more question in the chat, just to give you a heads up on our timing. So from Mark, he mentioned, I heard that the OMB is legally obligated to make a decision on the withheld funds by September 30th, the end of the federal year. Is that true?
It's a good question, Mark, and I have to admit, I don't have enough legal knowledge or expertise in this area to say yes or no or make any determination. It's a good question, but I don't know.
Okay. There's a lot of great comments if people want to check that out in the chat, but for right now, that looks like our last question and we can move forward.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you all so much.
Could you clarify? I'm sorry, this is Julie. There is one more kind of area that needs clarification, just to confirm from Tracy Chase. So for clarification, we will access to distance learning platforms that have the signed contracts, but we will need to use state funds or other funds for the dollars we would have originally received with our federal fund dollars.
For now, yes, that is the answer. And Tracy, that's exactly what we'll talk about on the next slide. So we'll get there soon, but I see Penny has also raised a question.
Yep.
Haley.
Yep,
Haley,
it looks like, sorry, unmuting. It looks like Penny would like to, wondering about regarding e-testing seats and tickets, have they been distributed? And if yes, how do we find out what we were given?
Good question. And actually, that's not a question I have an answer to. So I don't know if Linda or Marty, I just called you Lindy and merged your names. But I wonder if Linda or Marty could jump in the chat or verbally to let us know about that. I should check to make sure that one of them is actually here.
Yeah, they both are here.
Yeah,
Okay.
this is Marty, and that money has been spent for the e-tests and the TABE online. So that you'll be getting an email from me over the next couple weeks, just verifying what the amount. The amounts were, because there's more need, more requests this year. The amounts may not be exactly what you requested, but you definitely will be getting some e-tests or some TABE online test administrations.
Excellent. Thank you, Marty.
Susan Wettenkamp Brandt is wondering, should we expect a pause in regional transitions funding?
So with everything that's paid for on the slide through flow through, which includes regional transitions aid, there is no new money to distribute at this time. So there is no regional transitions aid at this time to distribute to grantees. And so each of you will need to think about, do you want some of those activities to continue at least temporarily with state funding or with other funding? But there is no federal flow through money. There is no regional transitions aid to distribute at this time.
Okay.
Okay. Well, let's go forward, and don't worry, there will be other time for questions later on in the session here. So going to Tracy, just following up on Tracy's question about tech fees and the distance learning license. So yes, there part of the federal aid includes technology aid, or the federal grant includes technology aid. And typically, and then there's also an invoice that you all receive from Literacy Minnesota. And that Literacy Minnesota invoice covers each consortium's, or that's that consortium's portion, so that they can use SID, the statewide adult education database, and the statewide distance learning licenses. Like last year, adult education consortia will need to pay that fee, or will need to pay that invoice. That is part of your grant assurances. And some grantees, we do have some of our grantees that have been state funded only. And so what they've been doing for the last several years is like paying out of their state funding for that technology aid, or that invoice from Literacy Minnesota. And at this point in time, that's maybe what other consortia will need to do as well. And with those distance learning licenses, there are some changes made that helped save some money and utilize and maximize how many platforms that you had available for you. So in 2025, 2026, there's a new administration structure for MobiMax, and this year we're piloting Ellie as a new state-supported platform. So those are some changes that are being made this year. Astrid, anything else you'd want to say about that?
No, just that the distance learning team has been communicating with folks about these changes. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to the distance learning support team email address, and I'll put that in the chat.
Thank you, Astrid. All right. Then let's go on to the next slide. Some news about assessments. We have some new tests that are approved. CASA's Goals 2 reading is now approved for you to use, and that's available in SID as well. We also want to note that with CASA's reading goals, the first version is extended in terms of its approval. You can now still use that test through June 30th of 2026. On the TABE side, TABE 1314 is approved. That was approved earlier this year. And there is an extended approval for TABE 11 and 12. So you can still use TABE 11, 12 through June 30th of 2026. You can see in the chat that the link to the policy is available on the MN ABE site. Now more than ever, it's important to show how effective we are as a system and to document our outcomes as best we can. So with that, we still have our Minnesota measurable skill gain targets. So last year, the target was 36.7%, which was a jump from the year before. For this 25-26 year, it has jumped very little, from only to 36.8%. So just 1/10 of a point is the change in the target. We really hope that each of you at the program level are able to not only meet but exceed that target. And hopefully we can document and show how effective we are as a system, in part through these measurable skill gains, but we know there are many other metrics and many other examples of success as well. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Jody.
All right, thanks, Brad. So related to our MSG targets, we do want to just give you the heads up that there is a possibility of a program improvement process beginning this fall. We want to acknowledge this is a difficult year. We know that many of you, and including our team, we're all feeling uncertain and stressed about what is happening. And we know that that's not exactly the ideal scenario or ideal context for you to have an additional responsibility like program improvement. However, as Brad said, what's also true is that there is additional scrutiny and additional attention being paid right now to our system, to adult education across the nation, and we want to be sure to be, attentive to our outcomes and telling our stories and having high quality programming. So we want you to know that we may be running a program improvement process this fall. And if you're not familiar with program improvement, basically it is just a cohort experience to help programs that are struggling with either post-testing rates or MSG rates to do some real targeted improvement in those areas. So that process sort of begins with the report card, which will be released late summer or early fall, hopefully by the end of August. I think we aren't promising anything about any timeline at the moment, but the plan is to release the report card as we usually do in August. And this is just a screenshot. You might remember seeing it from years past. One thing that the report card does, which shows on the next slide here, is it shows where the benchmarks are for possible participation in program improvement. So one benchmark is related to those MSG rates, or measurable skill gains. So as Brad mentioned, we have a statewide target, which for 24-25 was 36.7%. So we set the program improvement benchmark 30% below that target, which means that the benchmark for this year's report card will be set at 25.7%. So what that means for you is, if you aren't already doing this, you may want to take a look at your consortium or your program's overall MSG rates for ESL students and ABE students. And just note that if either one of those is 25.7% or less, that you may be flagged for possible participation in program improvement. Note that we flag entire consortia. We do not separate out different providers or members or programs within a consortium. It's the overall rate for the entire consortium. So that's one benchmark, is about MSGs. The other important benchmark is about post-testing rates. So consortia can be flagged for possible participation in program improvement if the post-testing rate for students who have at least 40 contact hours falls below 60%. So basically, expectation is when students get to 40 hours, or around 40 to 60 hours, that you are giving them a post-test. And if that's happening for less than 60% of your students in that category, then you may be flagged for program improvement. One small update this year, which I know some of you dealt with this issue last year, and we're glad to have made this update and this improvement. For the report card for this year, if you have students who have a non-NRS test-based MSG, in other words, if you have students who have made an MSG not on the CASAS or TABE, but one of the other ways, like getting a GED or just passing one of the GED or HiSET subtests, or if they were in workplace programming and they achieved a credential, for example. If you have a student who got an MSG some other way besides pre and post testing, they will not be included in this post testing rate. Because we acknowledge, if your student passes the GED, you don't need to post-test them. That is, they have achieved their goal, they have made a gain, and they should and can be moving on. So we just want to kind of give the heads up that this is in the works, that this is coming. We will be communicating more about that in August once the report card comes out, and we will, communicate clearly with any programs any consortia that will be required to participate in program improvement. And then next, I'm going to hand it off to Julie for some more updates.
Thank you, Jody. We've been talking a lot about budget cuts or holding of the federal funds. So there is a good couple of grant opportunities here for those that might be interested. There is the Pathways to Prosperity grant opportunities. There's actually 3 Pathways to Prosperity grants, and those are listed on the slide. And there's a link to where you can find all the information needed to apply for those grant opportunities. Keep in mind that this is often done closely with either your career force partners or other partners in the community working together to apply for the grants. If you do apply, I always encourage adult basic education to write in the costs of what it's actually costing them to run a program. So that's one grant that ABE and several ABE programs have been involved in the past and hopefully will continue to be involved in. It's kind of an evolution of the fast track grants. Now, the next grant is the Minnesota Job Skills Partnership Request for Proposals. It's a grant opportunity as well. And they actually have 3 programs, but there's 2 that might be of interest to adult basic education. One of them is the partnership program, and that's really to support working with businesses in education. And so if you have employers needing to skill up some incumbent workers, and adult basic education can be a key to doing that. This is funding that allows the employer and a provider to work together to provide those services. The other program is on the next slide. And that one's the Pathways program. This one might be a little more appropriate for adult basic education because it's designed to really focus on much of the adult education population. It's individuals who are at or below the 200% of federal poverty guidelines, and they're trying to make the transition from public assistance to the workforce. So there aren't a lot of adult basic education programs that apply for these grants, but it has been done in the past when they either work with their local community colleges, customized training programs. They work together to offer services to employers. It is possible for an adult basic education program, though, to submit a proposal to receive MJSP funding as well. And finally, the last slide just gives a little more information overall about the grant amounts. Very unlikely that you could apply for the full 400,000, but it's a good opportunity to support workplace education courses or to start working or building a partnership with an employer in the community. So keep those in mind. Obviously, it requires work to fill out the applications and apply, but they're out there and they're available. So with that, I will turn it over to Astrid.
Thanks, Julie. So we have a handful of professional development updates for you all. The first is just making sure that everyone saw the emails that went out earlier in June about updated staff and volunteer training policies. So in both of these cases, the requirements have not changed. But we do have updated versions for the volunteer training standards policy. The revision just clarifies which volunteers are exempt from initial training. And in the staff training policy, we needed to update some of the training links and information about that training. So those policies and all the others can be found on the mnabe.org website. And speaking of that website, we are very excited that there is now a new mnabe.org. So if you remember the old purple site, I know how much folks were actually using that in recent days, but there is a new and improved site. This is really your one-stop shop for all things related to the Minnesota adult education system. It's supported through the Literacy Action Network supplemental services grant. And we hope that this new version will be much easier for people to navigate and find all of the key information that you need about the Minnesota adult education system. So thank you to Literacy Action Network for your work and support of that site. There will continue to be population of the website throughout the summer with a more robust tour of the website during the state update at Summer Institute. So in the meantime, as you are exploring that site, we welcome your feedback. You can use the link that Neil is putting in the chat to provide any feedback about the new site content. And we hope that you enjoy it. So let's go to the next slide. Just a handful of important professional development coming up. Of course, there is Summer Institute coming up next month. The conference registration deadline has been extended till this Friday, so you still have time to get your registration in for the conference or one of the pre-conference sessions. And we're anticipating a lot of wonderful concurrent sessions, 52 breakouts this year, a keynote address, as well as a variety of social activities and the awards ceremony banquet and land annual meeting. So hope to see many of you there in person. Also looking ahead to the new school year, this is a great time for a refresher around our key set of content standards, the college and career readiness standards. Atlas staff are going to be doing a CCRS Foundation's refresher webinar to kick off the school year on September 9th. So this is a great opportunity for teachers or administrators who need a little bit of a refresher of CCRS Foundations. And in that webinar, you'll have the opportunity to go into a breakout group to focus on the ELA or the math standards. And because that webinar will be going into breakouts, it will not be recorded. So this is one to catch live if you can. And then looking ahead to this fall, we hope to see all of you in person at our fall manager meeting that is scheduled for Thursday, October 23rd in the metro area, location TBD. Watch for more information and registration in the coming month or two. And I just want to remind folks that travel support and reimbursement for participation in this event is built into the Literacy Action Network supplemental service grant. So we anticipate that those costs will be covered for participants. A handful of tools available to you as you think about planning professional development for you and your staff in the coming year. We have our professional development catalog, which has descriptions of all of the support network PD offerings on a searchable website. We have a one-page spreadsheet of all of the key dates that have been set to date that's linked from that catalog that you can access. The events calendar on the Atlas website is where you go to register for any PD activities that have been scheduled. And then Atlas has also put together a Google Doc with future PD and announcements. So that has key links and key information about upcoming professional development. A great tool just to bookmark in your browser because they are continually updating it. So hope that you'll use those tools to do some planning for the coming year. I do want to acknowledge again that there's a lot of uncertainty right now, given the federal funding situation and the fact that a portion of our supplemental service and professional development is funded through federal funds. So we're keeping an eye on that situation. We're starting to think about ways that professional development might be adjusted for the coming year. In the event that we do not receive federal funding, it is likely that there will be some changes, including probably moving in-person events to online events, potentially canceling some of their events. So we'll keep you updated, and we'll be seeking your input about what your shifting professional development needs and capacity are as we go forward. Another great resource for you and your staff are the Minnesota Adult Education online Canvas courses. So you can visit the course index to see all of the courses that are currently available. They are all free. They are facilitated, and really a wonderful opportunity for people to do learning at their own pace. This is something you can do either as an individual or something you might organize with groups or teams to go through courses together. And then finally, just an overview of some of the key events that are currently planned for the year. Again, some of this may shift, particularly those events that are planned to be in person, like regionals, may not take place or may be shifted to a virtual format if we do not receive federal funding. And I do want to just highlight one new event that is happening this year, and it's planned as a virtual event, so it will be going forward. The Digital Learning Institute will be hosted by Literacy Minnesota. Planning is underway. There was a survey in a recent newsletter to get your feedback about priorities for that event. So we hope that lots of you will be able to attend. And I see that there have been support network providers chiming in the chat with additional information. Haley, any questions that came up that we need to address before we move on?
No questions as of right now.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I'm going to turn it over to Haley and Brad for the August reporting submission.
Perfect. So I'll start us off with the August reporting submission. And Neil, you can go to the next slide, please. So you will all have received an email on June 9th that would have had an attachment that gave some instructional material for filling out the August reporting submission, and it will also have included a link to the Alchemer survey form. So this August reporting submission is due August 1st, 2025. And if you are looking for that link, I know that will be put later in the chat for that survey as well. So Neil, if we can move to the next slide, please. So there is an additional link that will be included in the slide deck, and Neil just put that into the chat. Thank you so much. If you did lose your link or you cannot find that email, this is the link to fill out that Alchemer survey. There will be different reports that are needed to be uploaded to this Alchemer survey throughout your experience of filling it out. We have noticed specifically that the level gains, MSG, and post-test rates report has given some grantees a bit of a difficulty in uploading it to the Alchemer survey form. So I'm just going to take an opportunity to give a couple of tech fixes there. So we've noted that if you are downloading that form, you need to ensure that it's downloaded as an Excel file. That Excel file needs to be downloaded to your desktop, not a downloads folder, and especially if you have access to something such as a OneDrive. We've noticed if it ends up in a shared file space, Alchemer does not appreciate that either. So when you save that, you'll want to save it to your desktop, and then you can upload that saved version of the file to that report page. We can move on to the next. Additional tips. So some have noted that that isn't quite everything that they needed to do in order to get this MSG report uploaded to the Alchemer survey. And I will note this is the first survey that you do have to upload while filling out the report. As of right now, I have not been made aware that any of the other uploads have given grantees issues. Oh, thank you, Katie. I do see that typo there, so I'll address that as well. I see in the chat. So if that still doesn't work, you can copy and paste the data from the downloaded SID report and create a new spreadsheet, paste the data into that spreadsheet, save that to your desktop, and upload it. And we have also had some grantees report that if they saved it in an older file type, such as an XLS, which, as Katie pointed out, rather than an XLSX, the newer version of the file, we've had some grantees that had a bit of success with that as well. So thank you, Katie, for pointing out that typo. Okay, so that was what we noticed in some tech fixes. Something you'll also want to be aware of is that you do have the ability, as you're filling the survey out, to save and continue later. So that save continue later option will be located in the upper right-hand corner of the survey. I will acknowledge that you do have to have some data populated. So you'll need to go at least hit next. You'll have to enter some data, go to the next page, etc., for you to get the option to save data. If you have not entered any answers or populated any surveys, or populated any uploads, it will not give you that option. So you do need to populate some data in order to do the save and continue later. When you choose that option, you will receive a link. It will ask you to input your email, so you will get that emailed link to you, and then you can use that new link that has been sent to your email in order to jump back into your survey and continue filling that out. This can be done as many times as you want throughout the survey. It's not limited to 1 or 2 times. You can use this save and continue as many times as you need to. One note, if you do end up losing your save and continue link, you can always reach out to me and I can go behind the scenes and find that link for you and send it to you. So we want to ensure that we're not having duplicate reports coming in, and you will want to make sure that you are using either the original link sent or the additional save and continue link. Next slide. Oh, yep, yeah, perfect. Okay. So this is what the Alchemer survey looks like when you first enter into it. It just asks some demographic information, consortium name, aid organization, contact, email, etc. You'll fill that out, you hit next, and then that will kind of bring you to a directions page, and then you'll encounter that first MSG report that you would need to fill out and download and upload. So go ahead and hit the next slide, Neil.
There's one more reminder in the notes there.
Ah, yes. Thank you. Good catch. Yes. I try not to get ahead of myself and then I get behind myself. Neil, thank you for that reminder. So as I mentioned, similar to when you're doing that save and continue, we don't want multiple surveys submitted. And we have had that in the past where grantees, a certain program person will begin filling out the survey, and then maybe the consortium manager will start filling out the survey. And then we get multiple from a single grantee. And we want to try to avoid that. So we are ensuring that we have the most accurate and up-to-date information. So just be sure that you are working within your team to decide who is going to be the primary, or passing that survey link off to them at that point. But we want to ensure that we are doing singular survey responses, 1 per consortia or 1 per grantee, if you will. Thank you, Neil, for that reminder. And then you'll note these are the sections for the August reporting submission. They should seem familiar. We've got level gains and post-tests. We have annual volunteer information, volunteer required training, staff required training, collaboration with employers. We have workforce training costs, career service costs, consortium one-stop, and then a verification of your state aid calculation for FY26. You will note these are the same 9 sections that you were required to submit responses on last year, so they should be relatively familiar. And I will, at this time, actually pass it over to Brad, who is going to go more in depth with each of these submission sections.
Thank you so much, Haley. All right, so section 1 is that level gains with post-test report for all ABE participants. So you can utilize that data all through June 30th, 2025, from July 1, 24 to June 30th, 25. You can see the different types of information that you want to make sure all your data is entered for into SID before downloading that report. Enrollee registration, test scores, contact hours, proxy hours, and diplomas earned. Then you can download that report. So you see in the chat, some folks have had to download and save and download again and save and resave again. But those are some tips with that report. Make sure Haley has already kind of shown a lot of the guidance about that, making sure that's downloaded as an Excel spreadsheet. And make sure look at that before you submit it to make sure it includes all of your participants and outcomes for your entire consortium, not just one provider. All right. In section 2, That is about the annual volunteer information report. And so there's each consortia or a consortium could decide to have multiple providers submit their own reports here. So that depending on how you want to fill that out, but there's a version of the survey for those that did use volunteers. And then there's a version of the survey for those that did not use volunteers. And you also then on the form in Alchemer can also preview those questions if you like. And utilizing that same date range of July 1, 24 to June 30th, 25. And you can run that annual volunteer report in SID to get all of the statistics you need. Also note that if a learner or volunteer fits multiple categories, just list them once. You don't need to list them in each category, but you'll need to choose which category they fit in best. And with that report or that survey, you can save your progress and complete it or make changes later. And there is help through the SID help article and the webinar recording, and those are linked in the slides. Section 3 is about the volunteer required training report. And so just make sure that you have all of those trainings that are required by the volunteer training standards policy. Make sure they have those entered in SID as an ABE volunteer training history item. And then that report, the volunteer required training report, can be found on the reports tab in SID. Same time range or date range of July 1, 24 to June 30th, 25. And you upload, please, one report per consortium. And again, upload those as Excel spreadsheets, unless your consortium did not use any volunteers during that year. And there is space in Alchemer to provide any additional information, explanation, whatever details you might want to add about your report. And for more information about that, those report features and how to create an exemption to either the 4 and 12-hour initial trainings, there is a SID help article that is linked in the slides as well that you can reference. Going into section 4, that is the staff required training report. Very similar to section 3, except you're utilizing the training, entering the trainings for your staff in SID, and entering them as ABE staff training history items. The staff required training report is also found on the reports tab in SID, utilizing that same date range of July 1, 24 to June 30th, 25. And again, we're asking you to upload one report per consortium as a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet. And there is space in Alchemer to provide additional information or additional explanation regarding your report if you would like. And then there's a SID a SID support help article to provide more information and technical assistance about the report features, how to create an exemption to the ABE Foundation's required training, and other helpful details. Then we move on to section 5, which is a section called Adult Education Programs Collaborating with Employers. This used to be called the Effectiveness in Serving Employers report. However, the federal government has changed the definition of that criteria, but we still find it valuable to know from you, who are the employers you're working with? How are you working with those and collaborating with those employers? Let us know, because that is really helpful guidance and data for us that we share with our partners Indeed, leadership at the Minnesota Department of Education, and with others to note how many employers and the extent of our reach in adult education with our services. With this spreadsheet, please complete it, save it, and upload it as an Excel spreadsheet. You can download a copy online via Google, and that link is in the slides. And we encourage you to document all employers that your consortium has served, utilizing that same date range of July 1, 24 to June 30th, 25. And we also would like to know what type of service was provided as you complete that spreadsheet. Note that if you're not serving any employers, you don't need to upload a blank spreadsheet. Just you'll let us know in Alchemer that you didn't work with any employers last year. An example of what that spreadsheet looks like here, similar to last year, you note your program, your contact person name, the number of employers, sites served, and then you upload each employer name, and each employer name should be by site. So if you worked with, let's say Anderson Windows, and they have two major employer sites that you're working with them at, you would note each site separately on a unique line. So that if you're working with them at two different sites, you would enter that as two different rows. And then there's a lot of information there that we'd like to know about that employer just to kind of make sure that we can recognize the service. Also, what we notice is that there's a lot of consortia that may be working with the same employer at the same employer site. So we typically consolidate this list across all consortia. And if there are similar consortia that are serving the same employer at the same site, we merge all those rows into one. And then on the next slide, you can see if you want help in understanding the categories, here's some explanation about understanding those categories of service and collaboration. And that's on that spreadsheet. That's the second tab. The next section is section 6, and that is our IET, or Integrated Education and Training Workforce Training Costs. And so this applies if the consortium, if you had an operating and approved IET program during that July 24 to June 25 period, and if you paid for the student workforce training portion of the IET utilizing either state adult education funds, federal adult education funds like those consortium funds, including regional transitions aid, or ILCE grant funds. So, and any of those costs could include staffing, materials, testing fees, or other resources used for that workforce training component of the IET. So here's what that looks like in Alchemer, and it's a little bit, if you answer yes to the question, each of these questions, then you'll get another question. If you get no, then you can just stop and enter in either of these questions. You can stop and then put 0 for the amounts. If you did not have an IET, if you did not pay for the the training portion utilizing those state or federal funds. So there's some yes or no questions, and on the next, here's where you actually put in the amounts. And again, you can put 0 for those amounts. It will require you to put an amount. So if there is no money that you spent on that, or if you didn't have an IET, you still need to put zeros in those slots or spaces. Then section 7 is asking you to calculate all of your career service costs using your state or federal ABE funding or your ILCE grant funding. Again, utilizing that July 24 to June 25 period. Some things that count as career service costs include outreach, intake, and orientation information that you provide, any pre-testing that you do with individuals coming into your program. This could be NRS pre-testing, or it could be any other type of pre-testing about aptitudes, abilities, or support service needs. Career service costs also includes any referrals you make and or coordination with any other activities, programs, or services. Career service costs also include sharing performance information and program cost information on eligible providers of education, training, and workforce services by program and provider type. And career service costs also includes any information that you've been sharing on support services or assistance and or referrals to things like childcare, child support, Medicaid, CHIP, SNAP, Earned Income Tax Credit, TANF or MFIP, and any other support services. In the past, before roughly 2 years ago, we would actually estimate these costs at the statewide level. However, the U.S. Department of Education told us that that was not allowable, that actually each grantee needed to calculate how much they spent on career services. And because we include things such as post-testing, it's not allowable for you as a provider or as a consortium to say that you spend $0 on career services, because that would mean you've done no post-testing, no referrals, you've not shared any information about your performance or outcomes. So, and that's not true, right? So you need to have some amount here for these career service costs. And again, some examples are staffing for intake staff, testing materials, any other relevant resources that you're paying for. And here's that full list again of what those services include. Just a little bit bigger, but we don't need to walk through all of those again. So we can go and show you what this looks like in Alchemer. So here's what you'd fill out just very quickly, like how much you paid for, how much in career services for state AB funding, federal adult education grant funding, and IELCE funding. It also gives you a space for any other types of funding, and let us know the source of that other funding that might be paying for that service. It doesn't mean, one additional note about that, it could be that your state AB funding is an amount and maybe your federal adult education grant funding is zero, but all three of those cannot be zero. At least one of those three, state AB funding or federal adult education funding or IELCE grant funding, one of those three need to have a number greater than zero. And we're getting close to the end, but section 8 of the August reporting submission is about your consortium one-stop contributions, basically the IFA costs and things to career force centers and to the workforce development areas and systems. Again, we're looking for what contributions your consortium made from July 1, 24 to June 30th of 25. And we encourage you to utilize the amounts and information based off of your IFA, that infrastructure funding agreement, to help determine those costs with that workforce development area where your consortium is located. Note that let's say there's one consortium that within that WDA is making the contribution on behalf of an entire region or multiple or other consortia, then what should happen there in terms of the reporting is the one consortium that is actually making that payment should document the full payment, and then all the other consortia would document zero in that case for their contribution. Just if your consortium is actually making the contribution, document that. If your consortium is kind of letting another consortium contribute on your behalf based on an agreement that you have, then you would put zero if you're not making that contribution. And here's some explanation. We're asking you to let us know about the WDA's workforce development areas, where you're located. Let us know the amount, state ABE funding, federal adult education funding, and IELCE funding. And if you have any in-kind amounts, you can enter that there. If you have zero for any of those, you need to put in zero before, otherwise it won't let you move on. And then finally, section 9 is the August reporting submission. This is your verification of your consortium state ABE aid calculation for 25-26 or fiscal year 26. You received those emails already, so please review your consortium state ABE aid calculation. Look at, in particular, the data on contact hours. Compare that to your table A. Do those match? Compare that to your look at the school district members that are listed for your consortium. Is that an accurate list, and does that data look accurate? Is there any other data on that entitlement report that you can look at and utilize to verify to make sure that your calculation of state ABE aid is correct? If you see any inaccuracies, please do not wait till August 1st. Email Jody and email Jody immediately, as soon as possible, if you have any inaccurate data there, so that we can correct that as soon as possible. Those are the 9 sections. I walked through all of them, so I'm going to turn it back over to Haley.
And Brad, before I let you hand the mic over, we do have a question from Amy Fish in the chat that is wondering, what about the tribal workforce centers?
Oh, good question, Amy. Yes, include those contributions as well. Like that counts as a contribution. Yes, please document that and share that information in the report.
Okay. All right, I'll take it now. If you have not heard enough information about the August reporting submission from myself and Brad, there is also the SID webinar that helps you prep for the August submission. So on that page of the SID help desk, it will have links to the webinar recording, to the August reporting guidance. It has Google and PDF slides. So you can get additional information about that August reporting submission on the SID website. If you have questions about a myriad of pieces with the August reporting submission, you'll note that there are different contacts depending on what piece of the August reporting submission you have questions with. It is all listed right there, and I'll acknowledge for the sake of time, I'm not going to go through them, but you will get better, more robust answers if you direct your questions to the appropriate person on our team. And at this point, does anybody have any questions about the August reporting submission? Either unmute or enter it into the chat at this point. Looks like Jill Rivard is wondering, do superintendents need to sign before we can submit?
Good question. The answer to that is no, thankfully. Make it a little easier for you.
I've got a question for Jody, but it's more specific. Well, maybe because it could affect some other people, but are we gonna have a time after this for a second for more specific questions?
So our next topic will be going in depth on adult education funding allocations for next year. But if you have a specific question about August reporting, we can answer that now. If you have a specific question about your award estimate, maybe you want to hold on that till we get to the next section.
I'll just ask quick and then, so I submitted mine already, but then Jenny had asked us, Sugarberg, to remove some people from our IET classes because we had just exited them instead of removed them that didn't have any hours.
Mm-hmm.
So that changed our far right, that chart. Is this an IET? It didn't change any of our numbers for level gains or credentials earned. It just changed the number of people it said was in an IET class. Do I need to resubmit it or is that okay?
Which report in particular is changed?
The level gains, MSGs, and postcards. You got the table.
Okay.
Right, there's that part that says use these columns to check MSGs for IET. And the
Yeah.
IET column, because we removed 9 people, so now it's 9 less people on that. But again, it didn't remove it because before we just exited them, we didn't remove them.
Okay. So in that situation, no, you do not need to resubmit, but please just make that change in your data and make sure that that is accurate before August 1st in SID.
Okay. So you don't use this for doing statewide IET or anything. You use a different report.
No, we do not. Nope.
So I'm done then. Okay. Thanks.
Yep. As long as you made that change in SID, you're done.
Okay. Thanks.
Yep.
And that's an important question that touches on that. If anybody has submitted and realizes that there is a data point that they need adjustment on, I can always go back in and again send that editing, save and continue link. So if anybody does need to adjust information that was input, please reach out to me sooner rather than later, and I'm more than happy to provide that link as well. And then, Brad, it looks like we have another question in the chat from Paulina. Regarding the career service costs, can we just include the staff costs of the staff who worked on outreach, testing, and collaboration with local employers, career force centers, and the other career service providers in the area?
Yes, if that is your best calculation on how to calculate career service costs, that is acceptable. And many consortia do utilize staff. Like what is the cost for those staff who are doing that outreach, testing, and collaboration work? Yep, so that seems like a reasonable way to calculate that amount.
And I'm just going to go ahead and read this one out loud in case this is relevant to other attendees. Tracy asked, employer engagement, does this mean we are on the employer's physical site, or can it be if the employer sends employees to our classroom? And Julie very helpfully replied, employers can send employees to the physical site. More importantly, you need to work with the employer to develop the curriculum offered to clarify to the classroom.
Yeah. So if you're working with an employer and offering that class at your own ABE program site, you can't just passively say, oh, well, this person happens to work at Walmart, so we're going to say Walmart's a collaborator. No. You actually need to be collaborating with that employer, like Julie noted. And then you can list that employer if you are collaborating with them, even if you're serving then the employees or folks at your own site. But list the employer and the site where the employer is located. Don't list your own program site then, but you still need the employer and the location of the employer that you're collaborating with on the collaboration spreadsheet.
Perfect. Okay. There's no other questions in the chat. If additional questions come up, again, just to acknowledge the time, please feel free to put them in the chat and we will do our best to answer those as well. And at this point, I will go ahead and pass it over to Jody.
All right, thanks, Haley. So I think our last topic for today is to talk through some more information and details about adult education funding. As I do that, I just want to define a few terms, maybe particularly for newer folks, or just to make sure that we all understand what's being talked about. I am going to talk about fiscal years, which I will often use the abbreviation FY. So FY25 is the year that just ended at the end of June. So that was sort of the 24-25 school year. And then FY26, I'm referring to the year that just started on July 1st of this year, so 25-26. And then you will hear me refer to UFARs. If you are wondering what in the world is UFARs, UFARs is a system of codes that must be used for financial fiscal reporting by any entity that gets funds from MDE. If you work for a school district, your business office, your accountants are probably very familiar with UFARs. We recognize some of you work for other kinds of organizations, and your accountant is probably not so familiar with UFARs, but you and they will need to have at least a little bit of understanding in order to complete your reporting for adult education ABE funds. So one important kind of code within UFARs is called a finance code, and the abbreviation is FIN or FIN. So we often talk about FIN 322 funds, and that refers to state ABE funds, and FIN 438 funds, which refers to federal adult education funds. And then lastly, I just want to note, we have a lot of words that we use that really all just mean money. So sometimes we call it funding, sometimes we call it aid, sometimes we call it entitlement, and sometimes we just call it grant. So I just want to acknowledge that all of those things mean the same thing. Good question in the chat, Eric. If federal funding is being withheld for the new year, why is it FY25 federal funds? Well, classic government. There's complicated words are used in not consistent ways. So the way we talk about state fiscal years is different than the way the federal government talks about fiscal years. So from the federal perspective, federal fiscal year 25 is the one that just started. But here in the state of Minnesota, when we talk about state fiscal years, state fiscal year 26 is the one that just started. So I am defaulting to using our state federal years in the next few slides here. But yes, I acknowledge it's inconsistent, which is annoying. Thanks for the question though. Okay, so I'm going to start by talking about FY25 funding, which is the funding for the year that just wrapped up. So first of all, just a reminder, your federal funds from FY25, the year that ended, June 30th. This was the first year that those funds were processed through MEGS, which is a new grant system here at MDE. This is a reminder for those of you who haven't done this, which I think is many consortia out there. You will need to work with your business office or your accountants to make sure that you create and submit reimbursement requests for that FY25 money, that FIN 438 FY28 money in MEGS as soon as you can. Just a note that federal money, that FY25 federal money, the last date that money could be spent was June 30th. So we know in the past when these funds used to be in SERVs, which was the older financial system, there was kind of a lot of wiggle room and a lot of leeway in terms of timing. Now, because of this new system MEGS, and because of all the uncertainty at the federal level, we really encourage you to make sure that all of your federal funds are spent, every last penny. Spend them all, use it all up, then create reimbursement requests, make sure that those payments hit your organization's bank account. Like, we just want to move this FY25 federal funding out, get it spent, get it used, so there's nothing left, no questions. So we just encourage you to be thinking about that. If you have no idea whether that's happening because you're not involved in your business office things, this may be the year to start asking some questions and start getting friendly with those folks. So just a reminder about that. Then also a reminder that state ABE funds, the FIN 322 funds, operate a little bit differently in terms of the time that they can be spent. So there is, in state statute, there's this little carryover clause, which allows you to use up to 20% of the award for a fiscal year can be used in the first quarter of the following year. So we are currently in the period of time where if you, for whatever reason, ended up with unspent state funds from last year, you can still use those. So in normal years, the typical year, we encourage you to think about like a one-time project, maybe some Chromebooks or a curriculum project. You can certainly do that this year. This year, you may also want to be thinking about the fact that federal funds are not coming to you, at least initially. So there may be ways, if you have any unspent state funding, to sort of plug a little bit of some of the holes of where what your federal funding might have been covering. So think creatively about that if you can, if you have any unspent funds. The only important thing to keep in mind is when you do this, your accountant or business office needs to course code correctly. So course code is another factor of the UFAR system. You really need to indicate in your accounting system that these expenditures, even though they occurred in July or August or September of this year, they are using up your FY25 funding. And the way you do that is by using course code 005. Just a reminder about how those course codes work. They do change every year. This may be something, even if you work in a district, your business office may not be familiar with this particular nuance of FIN 322 funding, which is this course code that changes every year. So again, be sure to check in with your business office and talk through and work through how these funds are being spent and that they are coded correctly. So those are just reminders for FY25. Next, I will talk some about FY26 funding. So that is funding for this year that is just starting right now. First of all, I will offer this visual for what we know about federal adult education funding. We've already spent a good deal of time asking lots of questions about that. So federal adult education funding, it's a big question mark right now. Thankfully, on the next slide, our state funding is not a question mark. So, and I do want to just acknowledge that I am grateful we live in a state that has made a commitment to invest in adult education at the state level. Not all states are in the same scenario as us. And as you can imagine, this current withholding of federal funds is hitting even harder in states where they don't have as much or even any state funding. So it's a really hard, difficult situation we're in to not have federal funding. And at the same time, we can also be appreciative of the amount of state funding that we have. So we have posted initial state ABE funding awards. Those are on the MDE website. And on the next slide, there is a link there. And maybe I think Neil is going to drop that in the chat. Yep, thanks, Neil. So if you haven't already, please do follow that link, check that report. Check your, go to your consortium and check your funding there. On the next slide, just to tie back to the August reporting submission, remember section 9 of that August reporting submission that's due on August 1st is to verify all of the information in this initial report that is currently posted. And I know Brad already said it once, I'm gonna say it again. If you find a mistake, it's possible, just depending on how and why the mistake happened, we may be able to correct it. So But if you notice any mistake in, the most common mistake might be in the number of contact hours, but there could be another thing that often folks look at is the school district members and just other numbers that are there in that report. If anything is wrong, please email me as soon as possible so we can figure out how to address that. If everything looks right, then you just need to verify that in your August submission report that's due August 1st. On the next slide is just a quick screenshot of this is what the report looks like, and I just put some red boxes to kind of show you where to look if this is new to you. At the top is where there's a drop down to find the report for your consortium. On the left-hand side is the list of members, so kind of check that out, make sure that looks right. And then that small box in the middle, that is your number of contact hours. So that's probably the most important piece of data that you want to check and make sure that it's correct. Then just some kind of overall notes about kind of where we're at with FY26 state funding. We did get an increase of about 2.4% for this year as compared to last year, which honestly in this political environment is nice. It doesn't alleviate the loss of the federal funding, but it's better than level funding or a reduction. In addition, when we look at hours, we also see our statewide system continues to grow in terms of hours. Every year since the low point of the pandemic, we have had growth every year. This past year, it ended up being a statewide increase in hours of a little over 9% as compared to the previous year. So that's great news and evidence of how important and utilized our system is statewide. One important thing to understand about that change in hours is that when we have an increase in contact hours statewide, the result of that, generally speaking, is a decrease in the contact hour rate. And that's because it's really mostly just a math problem, right? We're taking a certain amount of money and dividing it out by contact hours. So the more contact hours, the lower the amount per hour. So initially, when we ran the initial calculation that was posted in June, the initial contact hour rate was $8.83. And just for comparison, that's down from last year's $9.64. And just an asterisk, little adjustment announcement is that we have actually run an additional updated calculation after the initial one that's posted, because there was one consortium that found a mistake. The mistake was on our end. It was a mistake, MDE mistake, and so we corrected that mistake and we reran a new calculation. It resulted in a very small change. So now the contact hour rate is closer to $8.82. So you will see that when the final reports are posted in early August, for some of you, it won't make a difference. If you are already hitting one of the caps, nothing will change. For some of you, you'll see just a very, very slight decrease, less than 0.5% overall. So here is the timeline. So as we mentioned a couple of times, what should be happening right now is that at least one person from each consortium is very carefully checking that report and letting us know if there are any errors. If anyone else finds an error, and if we do end up correcting that error, it is possible that the final calculation could change a little bit again. It typically does not change substantially. We've never had a substantial change as a result of an error, but we do have a little bit more time. There's a little bit more time in the window to report an error and get it corrected. As of August 1st, we will make sure that there is a final complete calculation, and then we will post that to the MDE website. And then at that point is when we work on award letters. So here's the scenario right now. When award letters get sent out, it will have your consortium's final state aid award amount. And unfortunately, it will list 0 for all of the federal aid categories. So that's contact hour aid, regional transitions funding, low incidence disability aid, and technology aid. unless something happens between now and then and we, get some federal funding. But at this point, that's looking unlikely. So do expect that that's what you will see on that award letter. If there's a change in that federal aid at some point during this year, it's likely that we would have to reissue award letters with an updated amount. So I think we're almost to the end of our time, but just a quick pause here to ask if there are any questions about funding. I see the question about is growth spread out across the state, or are there pockets of growth in different geographic areas? Yeah, that's an excellent question, Tad, and we don't have that data. That data is in SID, but we have not figured that out. Actually, we don't know the answer to that question. We just compare statewide numbers. Okay, so not seeing any other questions, I'm going to hand it back over to Brad to wrap things up for us.
Thank you, Jody. Thanks, everyone. Don't worry, we'll have some time yet for questions here at the end, but we all will be very excited to see you at Summer Institute in Waite Park this summer, next month, less than a month away, actually. So we will see you there. And in preparation for Summer Institute, let's go to the next slide. We have a question for you, and please enter any ideas in the chat. I'm sure you have lots of feedback for us. When we do the adult education state session at Summer Institute, what topics would you like staff from the Minnesota Department of Education to address at this session that applies to the adult education field? Please let us know in the chat. What would you like us to say? Or what would you like us not to say? Please let us know in the chat, and we will utilize that to help us, to help inform our messages at Summer Institute next month. So please continue to add that in the chat. We really appreciate all of the tremendous work that you do, and we as a team have been talking here at the Minnesota Department of Education, and sometimes it's like, wow, it feels like there's so many changes coming from so many different directions that it's like, where is our safe port? Like, where can you go to for support? And honestly, it's all of you. Like every conversation that we have with each other as a team, every conversation that we have with you in the field, all those phone calls or meetups that we have, or just or emails that we go back and forth on, that talking with you and talking with the team here at the Department of Education, that is my safe place. That is my support. That is what keeps driving me, is hearing from you and talking with you. So thank you. And I really really appreciate all of you for the amazing work that you do. I mean, every time I talk with one of you, you have an example of here's why adult education is so important, or here's an amazing success, an exciting success that we saw recently within our program. So thank you all. Please put those ideas in the chat, and we'll get to questions here. But in the meantime, materials, including the recording and slides, will be both on the MN ABE site and the Literacy Action Network website. Our next web chat will be this fall, Wednesday, September 17th, from 1 to 2:30 p.m. And you can get that link in the chat, also on the Atlas website. Thank you all very much it's great to see you all virtually today. And let's go to the next slide, and we'll take time for questions. But in the meantime, let's end the recording.